rider on stage with a bunch of industrialists, and they gave me the mic. You believe that? We were just introduced, but a lot of you are probably looking at your phones, so let's put some names to faces really quickly. I'm George Kaloudis. I write words about Bitcoin, talk about Bitcoin for CoinDesk. Then Nate, go down the line and tell us who you are, what you do, where you do it.
Aloha! Hey everybody, my name is Nathaniel Harmon. I am the co-founder and CEO of OceanBit. I am a marine geologist and marine geochemist.
I'm Harry Suddock. I work with grid infrastructure, and we mine Bitcoin.
My name is Taylor Monnig, VP of Mining Technology for CleanSpark. We are a publicly traded Bitcoin mining company.
I'm Steve Barbour. I'm pretty much a professional online troll at this point. I actually own Upstream Data. Our company, we're known in the oil field as sort of an oil field service company for Bitcoin mining, but I would say more broadly, we're an upstream energy business, so even on the grid, off grid.
Cool. So I'm gonna do 90 seconds of moderation, and then I'm gonna let these guys get after it. This is one of the two panels here at Pacific Bitcoin that's about mining. Yesterday we had one that was called Mining Ethics and Public Policy. But with that behind us, today we're going to talk about how Bitcoin mining saves the world, which is a crazy title, but it just might save the world, right? So before we can even talk about how Bitcoin mining saves the world, I'm gonna really quickly tell you what Bitcoin mining is. So, and I will do it. There's a lot of nuance, a little bit of minutia there, but I'm going to just paper over that. Basically, Bitcoin mining is the underpinning and financial infrastructure of the Bitcoin network. It's how blocks are added to the blockchain. It's how new Bitcoins are minted, and it's effectively how transactions are sent. Great. How exactly is that going to save the world, right? Mining is intimately tied to energy. That's what a lot of these guys deal with every single day. Very crudely, energy turns to hash, turns to Bitcoin. And then these are machines, right? These aren't people with pickaxes mining anything. There are machines in large data centers. There are machines in shipping containers on oil field sites. There are machines in my dad's garage. Somehow these are supposed to change the world. Let's do two prongs for this. As a moderator, I want to set it up. We're going to have a societal prong, which is going to be a little bit shorter than the energy prong. From a societal perspective, Bitcoin mining should enable financial self-sovereignty, and it should separate state from money. From an energy perspective, what Bitcoin mining should do is expand energy production and our baseload for our grids, free market or not. So all that to say, I'm going to toss the first question from a societal perspective to my man Steve. So Steve, we share a general distaste for fiat in general. And you're a proponent of off-grid, more distributed mining operations. Could you touch on how that type of mining specifically helps assist the self-sovereignty and separation of state and money?
Yeah, in regards to how does Bitcoin mining help self-sovereignty, I often try to frame, Bitcoin mining's use case in two similar but sort of maybe even opposing directions. Our company, we focus on upstream energy production, generating stations. Bitcoin mining is effectively an energy systems technology that makes energy systems more efficient. So, every energy system comes with a generation, distribution, and a load. So one of the biggest, applications of Bitcoin mining is a energy-hungry consumer that can be located at the energy source is you can put it right at the generation point. You can load those generating stations, we're talking thermal generation like coal, natural gas. You have non-thermal, nuclear of course, you have non-thermal, hydro, wind, solar, all that stuff, OTEC. I know we're gonna talk about that. So it's it's a system to optimize energy production, and that sort of empowers energy producers. It makes them more efficient. It makes them waste less resources, which is very, very important. And the other thing I frame is it's sort of, it's an energy systems optimizer, if you want to look at it that way. But the other thing it does is it enables privacy. All Bitcoin mining privacy, or Bitcoin privacy, is rooted in mining. Mining is how Bitcoin obviously works. It's the consensus mechanism. But that's where you get optimal privacy. So, for example, just to show my own company, we do industrial Bitcoin mining designs and construction for people. We also do it, I did a product that was, I call it downstream mining, upstream mining versus downstream mining, which was their black box. And that, what like something like home mining does, which obviously in a market like this, like home miners aren't making any money, unless you got like, you're stealing power or something. But what you get with mining is privacy. And so it's inherently private on how you acquire the coins. It's inherently non-KYC as long as you can do it through a non-KYC mining pool. So that's like the two things it serves. Mining serves as censorship resistance. So back to your question, how does it help self-sovereignty? Well, one, it enables privacy, which is critical to Bitcoin actually working long term, because you have to circumvent censorship. You cannot be surveilled if you're not going to be censored. So that's pretty much how I frame it out. You got upstream mining, which is an energy systems optimizer, and you have downstream mining, which is a privacy optimizer. So
totally makes sense. And Harry, I want to give you sort of a philosophical question. Well, maybe a philosophical framing, a way to add to the framing. So I've heard you talk about Bitcoin as a superior monetary good that is a result of leaving a difficult problem up to a market. And I think that framing is pretty important to just the general mining conversation, but to the social element of this. So real quickly, just touch on what you mean by that.
It's very complicated. Bitcoin's very complicated.
Make it simple.
And the way that we simplify it is that Bitcoin introduces a second customer into a marketplace for energy that is largely captured as it stands today. So what does that mean? It means that there's me flicking my light switches on, and I'm introducing a demand for the energy that is going to then flow through the wires and make my lights run. There's a demand function that is me and my desire for light. There's another demand function in this market for energy now, which is my demand for Bitcoin to be generated through the hashing process. And so the demand curve that I represent as a consumer of light, and the demand curve that Bitcoin miners represent as consumers of energy in service of generating Bitcoin revenues, those demand functions sit very, very far apart. And so the ability to utilize generation assets, transmission assets, and delivery assets within energy systems, the sort of the useful surface area grows much, much larger. And that's very exciting because we as a human species, we benefit greatly when energy gets generated. So if you look at sort of our world in data or any of these sort of taxonomies of how do societies improve over time, energy generation per capita and the cost thereof is an incredible biomarker for a healthy society. So by increasing the demand space for power, we actually incentivize the generation of power, which becomes a prosperity flywheel over time when introduced to enough technologies, to enough people, and to enough smaller, more local economies. This is an enormous flywheel for good if we allow it to turn.
Totally. Now, Taylor, we're talking about the little guy a lot over here, and you work at a big public mining company. So how exactly are you, big data center, public miner, helping enable self-sovereignty for the little guy?
So I guess I'll take it from a society perspective. Our last two acquisitions are good examples of this. These are sites that are in rural Georgia, have a ton of excess power that was simply just going to waste. We've been able to go in there, utilize over 100 megawatts of power, provide over 50 jobs, and introduce Bitcoin into the daily lives of all these people, along with millions of dollars of revenue for these small cities. So from a self-sovereignty perspective, it might be a little bit difficult, but from a societal perspective, we're making a huge impact with mining all across rural Georgia by building these data centers.
Cool. Let's talk about energy. I think people want to hear us talk about energy anyway. So Harry, you touched on it. Per capita energy production is a good thing. Energy go up, bad things go down. I read something recently from Lynn Alden where basically we're just trying to capture the sun in some capacity, as much concentrated sun as we can. It's a good segue to this guy over here who was yelling earlier about all sorts of things. So Nate, let's talk about untapped energy sources, and this is a chance for you to shill the things you're working on. How can Bitcoin mining help enable that so we can get more energy, so we can, save the world?
Absolutely. So a industrial revolution is the confluence of 3 separate technologies that are an order of magnitude better than the previous generation. The first industrial revolution was coal. You need a new energy source. It was the steam engine. You need a new form of transportation. And then it was the telegraph. You need a new form of communication. So then the second one was petroleum, the internal combustion engine, and the telephone, television, radio, etc. The current industrial revolution we are going through, I think the communication method is pretty obvious. We're being live streamed to the world over this series of tubes, and of course, renewable energy. And I absolutely include nuclear as a renewable energy. It's a new form of energy. Now, this theory is from an economist named Jeremy Rifkin, and he proposes that zero marginal cost drone transportation is this new form of transportation. And that's nonsense, because someone's going to have to own those drones. It can never reach zero marginal cost transportation. But Bitcoin, by being able to monetize energy, working with the new energy types, transporting value across the internet at the speed of light is. And so in my case, I want to mine Bitcoin in the middle of the ocean, and there is no other way to get my electrons in any form back to land outside of Bitcoin. And this works in the oil fields, this works at nuclear, this works for... There is energy around us, everywhere, and it's all about getting it and then getting it to scale.
Yeah, and an important metaphor that a lot of Bitcoiners use, I think incorrectly, is Bitcoin is a battery, and that doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't store energy at all, but you can push value around, right, using Bitcoin mining. So if you're going to say Bitcoin is a battery, say at least it's a value battery. It stores value. It's a store of value. Here, you want to add a little bit to his story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have some really great case studies of how this works. So if you look at the small place of Iceland, Iceland's biggest export is energy. It just looks like aluminum, right? So we've seen examples of this where high energy intensive manufacturing processes are able to be done in a remote location, and then there's a commodity or a durable good that gets generated and then moved as a proxy for that input cost. And so Bitcoin mining is already doing this, right? We're seeing it in oil fields. We're seeing it happen. If you look at any of sort of the demand response data, those electrons are going to move no matter what. And if there's not a Bitcoin miner to soak them up, we have other really ingenious ideas like pumped storage. So if you don't know what pumped storage is, it's important to know, because our current plan when an energy system across a large sort of tapestry of the grid is overloaded with generation and off-takers are not plentiful enough, our current plan is we pump water up a hill, because the potential energy of the water at the top of the hill is more valuable than anything else we've figured out. And so on a revenue per megawatt hour basis, their plan is just far, far less lucrative than our plan. And so this is the great beauty of markets, is that over time, the people with the better plan who make more revenue per unit of input are going to win. And they're going to win bigly. So it's this very exciting opportunity to be able to marry these technological advances to just far greater utilization across components of our systems that already exist and the systems that we're going to have to build on a net new basis as well. And these unlocks will have profound implications, really everywhere. But what's important, for me to kind of leave you with a little bit is that this is A, it's not new, it's just better, and then B, people often have the pushback of like, well, but it's hard and complicated and we haven't done it yet. And so to that I offer, 35 years ago, nobody had sent an email or had sent, a wire transfer without talking to someone or showing up at a bank branch. And so our ability to adapt to highly accretive new technologies is enormous. And so I like to bet on our adaptation first.
Yeah,
Pumped hydro.
No, you go.
Pumped hydro is literally the definition of a Sisyphusian task.
No, and on the opposite side, all this, Bitcoin allows us to create energy in a new way, right? But it's also allowed for funding to save energies in really creative ways, right? Data center industry has been around for a long time, but Bitcoin has advanced immersion cooling in a way that I don't think anybody else would have done, right? We'd probably be 10, 15 years behind immersion cooling, but right now you're seeing 100 megawatt deployments going on, and they're all crypto related, they're all ASIC related. And so while we also are generating power in new and exciting ways, we're also able to save power in new and exciting ways. I think immersion cooling probably end up saving a couple 100,000 terawatt hours, over the next 1,000 years of computing.
I'll just add some even speculative flavor. We haven't really even touched the surface of what Bitcoin mining is going to do for society on the energy system side and on the privacy side. We're at the beginning, as you all know. There's even I like to talk about like what could the future look like. Right now, the bulk of all of Bitcoin mining is done on stationary power generation, sitting power plants, sitting Bitcoin mines. Can you think of energy waste in non-stationary applications? Like, how do you get to work every day? You get to work in a little rocket ship with an internal combustion engine, or if you have a Tesla. Tesla won't apply in this case, but if you have what's that?
External combustion engine.
Yeah, the Tesla is the external combustion engine. That's right, powered by coal. But if like most people, if you're scooting around on a scooter or whatever with an internal combustion engine, a moving power plant, we waste so much energy and break energy. With the trend in something like Bitcoin mining, how it's been going towards this path of power density, look at an S9 versus an S19 and physical weight versus power output. There's actually a potential, I don't know if it's going to be possible with current tech, but if we keep improving the thermals on this technology, like the chip temperature, you could conceivably have a very low weight Bitcoin mining load strapped to every engine, because engines aren't going away despite what, they're feeding you here in California. They're not going anywhere. I could go into that all day long, but while we have engines, why not make them more energy efficient? So there's this like potential that we haven't even scratched the surface in, where you could have a close to weightless Bitcoin mine responding to braking your vehicle instead of wasting it in heat. And that's gasoline that would be monetized. That effectively is turning into brake energy. So there's all kinds of crazy, cool stuff coming.
Yeah, people talk about the technology of, we underestimate what can actually happen, and we're going to have people running around with bird scooters, and they're going to be mining Bitcoin. You did talk a little bit about chips, and backstage, we wanted to talk about this Intel chip potentially. Is it worth talking about, or do you even want to mention it, Harry?
I think it's worth talking about sort of the technology environment of ASICs writ large. It's sort of worth sort of the 5-sentence version, which is just that it's important to understand that the way that we consume this energy, we utilize this energy, is in computers that look like shoeboxes. And in those, there's an enormous amount of chip density, there's an enormous amount of compute density, and heat density. And so there's these really exciting ways to generate hashes in lots, in all of these sort of different deployment environments and these different ways. There's Bitmain, there's MicroBT. Intel made some announcements last year, and we're one of their customers, which is not sort of the exciting area. The exciting area, overall, is that it's a very dynamic marketplace for these, they're basically little baby Bitcoin bonds where they pay you a yield in Bitcoin, and right now they're valued sort of on a forward-looking Bitcoin revenue basis. That's smaller today than it was. But it's this other area where we get really excited about what could happen in the energy space. I think in a financing and sort of a financial services lens, what the hardware that underlies these systems also represent a really interesting sort of creative design space where an industrious financial engineer could have as much of an exciting time building products as maybe a mechanical engineer would be able to at one of these sites. So it's important to keep a very sort of broad perspective around what does the design space and the innovation space look like across Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, and it doesn't just stop at the end of the dirt. It also begins sort of at the beginning of the financial stack as well.
So if we're touching on the design space of Bitcoin mining, the particular type of energy that I work on, ocean thermal energy conversion, the delta T, the difference in temperature between warm surface water, deep cold water, happens to overlap perfectly with the heat output of these computers. So what we want to do is, for the first time in history, not just be an appendage on the side of an energy generation source, but to actually reuse that heat to pump it back into the original energy generation, improving efficiency and, more importantly, reducing my heat exchange surface area by many, many meters squared.
And you're hiring me to consult with you on that job, right?
Absolutely.
We discussed that, so okay, it's set in stone.
So we've been talking a lot about energy, and I want to throw it up to the group again for this question about the US grid, which is so terrible. Is the US grid so bad that even Bitcoin can't fix this, right? Is just mining Bitcoin going to fix our grid?
It's getting there.
Yeah?
I think so. I mean, I've been a little critical of stuff like that's going on in Texas. I mean, the Texas Bitcoin miners in particular are always bragging how awesome Texas is, and it is awesome in Texas. I'm hoping to start a business down there. But, for example, West Texas, they've installed all this wind when you're in the land of the biggest natural gas wasting basin in probably in the country, probably in North America, the Permian Basin, all the immense flare gas that happens down there. I mean, you do a flyover and you will see the sky lit up with flares. So the U.S. grid is putting unreliable baseload in place of a reliable opportunity that's there through their fiat subsidies and all that. But I would say that the U.S. has done a horrible job, and Canada as well. I'm a Canadian, so I'm not here to insult you guys, but horrible job investing in reliable baseload. And it turns out that all this, divesting from coal and all these things, natural gas and the like, has just shifted all the jobs and the coal to places like China, where they now manufacture more of our goods. So I would say the U.S. needs to wake up.
Yeah. Guys, you guys are awesome. We only have 45 seconds left, which is crazy. They should have given us more time. This is a very hard, complicated topic. After the fact, you should come up to these guys and ask them a bunch of questions because they have good answers. I wrote down a bunch of them here. We should ask them, how feasible solo mining versus corporate mining? How worried should we be worried about geographic centralization in China and in Russia? Why can't nuclear solve all our problems? Why can't it solve all our problems? But the bottom line is, pretty sure Bitcoin mining might be able to save the world.
Take to the sea.
Take to the seas. Thank you, guys. And yeah.
Thank you for having us.